policy database that has existing laws and then create a platform where new laws can be discussed, and the moment they are passed on, maybe they pass on as laws, they can be now filed as complete laws. Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Such an amazing database. I want to ask, does it have an offline version? Is it just online? Or you could have like a work offline, then update it back online? That's the first question. Then when you said ICT policy, you know, there are also other policies, like you said, like the traditional medicine policy that might have greater implication in this area. Also things like national health ICT policies, you know, about all those policies, do you look at those ones too? Can those ones have a place in this place? Because they, in a way, they speak to ICT policy, but they just are in the areas of health, maybe in the area of education and things like that. So those are the two questions I will ask.
So to start with the last one, it's dependent on the rules that the database runs on. So almost everything in the next 5-10 years, almost everything will be affecting ICT because it's the technology on which we are running almost everything. So it will be extremely hard to now bring all the laws there. And I know there are so many countries that are running the open law initiative where laws are published or case laws are published as soon as they are made available. So Kenya Law, for example, KenyaLaw.org is an example where judgments or whatever are just posted online almost immediately to give people access. And we would not want to replicate what is being done over there. But we would want to narrow down on the laws that we feel directly affect as a holistic approach the ICT sector. When you talk about cybersecurity, by all means and purposes, it was written direct for the ICT sector. And so for those other laws, it will be, maybe a footnote somewhere saying like, these laws affect this, and you can get them from Kenya Law or those other areas. Now to your first question, which was about an offline database, I think that would be fantastic. Only that now you would need to synchronize your servers with our servers so that you can get all that. And if you're synchronizing, then it means you're online. So the moment you talk about an offline database, then it would mean it's localized to your space. And indeed, actually, that is what happened with Africa Policy Database. When we were researching on the African Union Cybersecurity Convention, we realized that we struggled. Probably we took almost half of our research time trying to gather materials. It was chaotic. But the moment we classified them in folders and tagged them like this is for this country and it's talking on this, we realized that what are we doing with all these resources just on our laptops? Why don't we just create an online portal where people can just easily access them so that they don't have to go through the trouble we went through? And that's what we did. And luckily, we got a very interesting conversation happening. Indeed, that was with Facebook. We were actually at a conference and we were just talking, and then they were like, why don't you do it? And we're like, okay, let's do it. And that's how actually Africa ICT Policy Database was created, because it was really a question of transitioning our database, refining it, and coming this far. And then that was it. So how we take this conversation forward really will depend on the kind of interest, or like if you feel like it's something that would help your work, it's free and you can just contact us. We give you access, and then you can be uploading documents for your region. Yep. How much time do we have? Minutes. Okay, I think if anyone would want, there's a question over there.
Hi, this is just a functional question. When you have a copy of an ICT policy in a PDF format or a Word document format, do you just upload the document to the particular field or branch, or do you extract the content of the document and then publish it on your site?
We started with the first. We uploaded the PDF because at times documents like legal documents will be referenced based even on like on page number or like section number, and some of these attributes might not be captured by optical character readers. But what we are thinking is creating a parallel format where we have the PDF version, which will be the canonical one, and then the soft version, which is an extraction of the PDF, which will help in indexing the database. That will go a long way in helping research. So anyone who is doing comparative work will find it very easy to just run across and say, I want to study how many countries have criminalized something like LGBTQ or sexual orientation and gender-based violence. You just hit one click and then all the laws will be there. And that will help a lot for research organizations. And that's what we are saying. If people can look into like how these kind of things can fit in their libraries, so that it's not a burden, like an operational burden on the organization that probably is not set up to work on legal resources as their core mandate, but they are benefiting from it. And in case they find any new interesting thing happening in their country, they can easily update, or at least can inform whoever is updating for their region. That would be great.
So how far away are you from that feature?
That will depend on how much how many organizations would be willing to join that. But as far as Kenya is concerned, we are working with an interesting organization called Shodan, and Transparency Toolkit, one of their products. Transparency Toolkit have looked into most of the data that most of the PDFs we have, and they have converted them. Some of them are tricky because they are scans. There is no existing PDF version that was converted from a soft copy. So character or recognition is a bit hard, but those ones can always be worked on. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so I don't know if the guy at the back can give us back the slide with the contact details. Oh, and also something else in terms of the attributes of the software that was used. One, we made sure that it's privacy respecting, it's open source. We do not in any way, by the way, and that's why probably it looks very ugly. I'm not saying open source has to be ugly, but we do not use proprietary code that maybe requires licenses and such. So as much as you would want to see probably a shiny document, it will just be as bare bones as possible. But we are not, if you have like say user experience design or experience and you are in this community, I think it would be awesome if we can improve on it. But knowing that the reason we are improving on user interface is not to add on to licensing requirements. We are adding so that to make it easy for people who are using it. So are we there? Koliwe, you have a question? No, we don't have policy analysis.
I find it's easier to read policy analysis than to interact with the policy or law without the context. So do you have the country context And do you have plans to have analysis on that portal as well?
So we do have a country profile, and in fact, okay, if you get the slides back, kindly let me know. But yes, what we did is we captured basic country profiles, something like internet penetration rates, and we will be very keen to point out where our sources are, because we don't want to create an authority on us, and we would want you to also reference back. And in case they are updated figures, then we can always go back and update it, or we can scrape it and it can just do it automatically. However, if you think about policy analysis, that would require, a huge investment in terms of the personnel who will be doing this authoritatively. So we have like 30 laws in Kenya. To comment on 30 laws, like critically, would require time and resources, and probably the people who we want to read this. Initially, the people we had in mind, as you rightly pointed out, were interested parties. Say researchers or students or civil society, litigants, people who are interested in ICT and law and would appreciate a document. So to that extent, I would say we weren't very focused on policy analysis much more than we were interested with the policy document itself. No, you can use this. It's okay.
Because you want organizations to actually own it. For instance, in Zimbabwe, we've actually got a number of people that have done policy analysis. So it might be an academic paper, it might be existing research. So my question was, would there be plans to actually have a single or an addition for you to sort of get that policy analysis that's already existing, so you don't actually have to pay for it? So if you come to Zimbabwe, for instance, we have already done an analysis of all the laws, which are not actually cyber laws, but other existing laws that would actually affect, internet use and establishment. So I find that it would actually make it richer in that, of course, you have the country analysis, but you don't have the context in terms of the violations and how those specific laws are being used.
So if you go to the database itself, there is a section. Yeah, there we are. Okay, I'm not sure you can see this, but down here we have the regulations, case law, ICT related news, and bills. So under ICT related news, ideally the reason we put that subsection there was to capture anything that is related to that country that is not an act of parliament, or it's not a case law. And when it's something like, say, there's a new report, say, by PIN about Cameroon, we would want it to go under ICT-related news. But we do not want to pretend even for a minute we have the capacity to do all that for all the countries, because there are people who are doing this in their small ways and their big ways for each country. And the idea was ours is to aggregate what is being done. And I feel, for example, like in this case, for example, this is a PDF of the National Information Technology Development Act of 2007 in Nigeria. If it so happens that there is a change or an amendment to this law, someone who is in Nigeria would be in a better position to comment on it, even if it's like just a short one-pager explaining the context and the changes. And then anyone, say someone in Zambia, can easily go there and look at what's happening and, get some factual information. The reason I'm emphasizing on local-based organizations is because you have capacity already invested in that, and you have much more local knowledge to know what's happening. And this, in the bigger scheme of things, is a way of bringing resources closer to the people by the people, so that we are not depending on an external player to come and tell us like, you know, this happened here, and yet we are here and we can see it happening. It's a platform to share what we know about what's happening. And that's why if we are to talk about partnerships, this for me is one of the areas we can partner in a smooth way that is just open for anyone to contribute. So I guess, Koliwe, we have answered your question. But it speaks straight to the issue. If you are interested in follow-up with this and how we can partner, kindly, you can do an email to cpit@strathmore.edu, and then we can have that conversation around it. And I know there are some other countries, other organizations that had even done this. I do know Research ICT Africa had this, almost the same idea, only that maybe it was focused for the research projects. And maybe Chennai, because you're here, you can comment about it, especially from the research capacity.
Thanks, Moses. Yeah, so we did have, and we still have some of the information. And what we tried to also aid on was the market dynamics around mobile network operators, their earnings, the ones that were publicly listed. And then I think the biggest issue for us was a matter of challenge of like capacity, where, and we did focus on the countries that we were doing surveys in, but we had also envisioned on making it bigger because we collect prices for 48 countries that with operators that advertise online. So it was an issue around carrying it on. And I'm actually excited about this because the idea just allows for people to actually collaborate. And with the current country surveys that we will be doing, at least we can actually have a portal where we can upload this kind of information that we'll be working on. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a great way of collaborating and taking, best practice. Actually, we reached out to Research ICT Africa severally, and Rico was one of our friends when we were making this to see how best to do this. So, yeah, thank you very much. If you would want to catch up with me on this, available up until tomorrow midday, and we can take it from there. Thank you very much.
So we should have been starting the next panel at the moment, but then let's just give them a few minutes to come down from the other parallel session, and then we can kickstart the conversation, which is actually the last for the 2017 Internet Freedom Forum. So yeah, we have just a few minutes to still talk to each other. I don't know. Yeah, because we're all looking too serious, and I think it's not too good. So the thing is, some of our panelists are around. So I guess while we wait, I would just ask them to join or to come up here and take their seats before we start. We have the Foreign Affairs Officer, Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, United States, Gigi Alford. We can do better. Thank you. And then we have the Deputy Director, ICT, National Communications Authority, Ghana, Kenneth Adu Amanfor. We also have the publisher of Sahara Reporters, Omoyele Showari. So yeah, I mean, time is of essence. Time is important. I think, yeah, I think we have enough to start. We're missing. Managing Director, Business Unusual, Jimmy Oluwanuiga. We can do better, come on. Thank you. Okay. We also have the National Security Advisor for Nigeria, Major General Babagana Mongono, retired. He's not in the room, and there's no representative. And we have Henriette Easter-Heisen. You've been seeing her around. She's not here yet, but then I guess she'd come and join the panel 4-1. I guess we can start. So, difficult conversations. You're smiling. So, I would let you guys start off. 3 minutes, introductory statements on difficult conversations in your area of specialization. Go first, Jimmy. Okay, actually, in the spirit of the ICT, Girls in ICT Day, Gigi should start. Oh, just 2 more people.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So let's dive right in. I definitely thought that coming from the U.S. Department of State in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, and working on internet freedom, that I've really been in a lot of these conversations where the whole complexity of the world starts to mix and mingle. And I've heard people use a term called context collapse. And I thought that that was a good way to sort of frame why I think sometimes the conversations either feel more complicated or they feel new, even though when you start to just change your frame of mind, it begins to get a little more clear, and you begin to realize that these are the same conversations we've had every time there's a new technology, and it just takes a little bit of catching up with the new speed of things and the new power of things and the new power of people. But that doesn't mean that we diminish or disregard where things do cause new dynamics and where the people and the institutions and the communities have to wrestle with these tensions and try to resolve them. I started out as a print journalist. I was a sports reporter, my first job, and I worked for a newspaper, right? We actually, did computer-assisted reporting, but at the end of the day, we produced something that went out to people that they could touch and feel and read in their hands. So I can appreciate very much the feelings of disruption and displacement that come with, a new technology that does take away your livelihood, or does start to challenge the ways that you did things before and the way that you thought about them. But I think I'm also then proof that you can still be friends with the internet, even if it comes and shakes things up a little bit. So to that, now that you know my background in journalism, I've been thinking a lot these past couple days about this saying in the communication studies world that the medium is the message. And Henriette, in her opening remarks, did talk about some of the tensions over content. And I was thinking about them as the message that it sends. And when the internet is this convergence of different kinds of media, it's your pen and paper now, it's your TV, it's your photographs, it's all the different ways that we used to communicate messages in different contexts, and now it's all collapsed together. So if the medium is the message, and that used to be just an observation about the social implications of the medium that you chose, I think it's also a profound human rights statement. And this is kind of the end of what I wanted to open up with. So the medium is the message. If you think about the human rights implication of what you used to write on paper, what you used to send in an envelope to a friend, it was a very personal, very private message. Now it's become much more public, and it's had a broader reach than it did before. And so somebody might misinterpret it. Someone might put it in a context that you didn't intend. Or someone might just challenge your very right to be able to communicate those things, whether they were the intended audience or not. So if we use platforms as this, this new multimedia, if we use platforms that facilitate free speech, that is in itself a profound statement about human rights, even if we're not even talking about rights themselves, even if we're not using the language of rights. That act, that, as Henriette said yesterday, enjoying and using this platform and this new access, this ability that we have that we didn't have before at quite the same scale, this is where those contexts come together and become a political statement or a religious statement, a social statement, a gender statement that is challenging the status quo. And so these are where I think the conversations that we'll start to have on the more specifics, where I think we have to recognize that we are now almost responsible for the messages, the multiple messages that we're sending because of the power of the medium that we're using. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm from the regulator, so probably, so basically I work for the government. And I'm responsible for telecommunication and ensuring that, we move ICT forward. One of the main issues with our sector that we are facing that, people talk about it or people don't want to talk about it is quality of service. We've put together, we have about 6 mobile operators right now that we have lances in operations. We've given them all the required lances that they have. We've given them the fiber infrastructure lances, and they've all landed their cable at the shore. We've created a very enable environment for them to operate in a free and fair competitive environment. However, the services, the quality of service that they are providing to the citizenry is still not up to date. Recently, we have our new president coming in. He had a meeting with his key security officials, and then he was trying to make a very important call, and the president call couldn't even stay on for 2 minutes. Yes, he makes the call and then it goes off. They tried with different mobile operators and still couldn't get through, stay on even for 2 minutes. So, but we have a national security communication infrastructure, which is more like an emergency communication infrastructure that we have. Sorry. Yeah. So. Let's fix up. So the president tried to make this call, and he tried with different mobile operators, and he still couldn't stay on for even 2 minutes. And we have a national communications infrastructure. It's basically for emergency response that is being handled by the national security. And then they tried that, and that one was able to go through. So then the question is, these are all infrastructures that have been deployed with the same conditions and with the same license conditions, everything. Now, if all these mobile operators' network could not even, quality of service could not be up for 2 minutes, and this one can go, then what's the issue? Because what the operators always complain is that we put in all the capital investment, and they have all the statistics that will show to show you why you can't blame them for poor quality of service. So these are the challenging areas that we are dealing with, because the consumers are not getting value for money, and they are paying for it. So it's one of the challenging areas. Another challenging area is unlawful interception. The question is, how do you, the challenge we are faced now is national security is for all. It's for all the entire country. How do you prevent unlawful interception, and then also ensure that you have the national security, or protect the citizens in terms of national security issues? So those are the two balancing areas that is kind of a challenge to us. Data privacy is also an issue. Fortunately, we have our Data Privacy Act. We have a Data Protection Commission who have their act and mandated to, and they have the act that actually specify that protect data of the users and how data is used, processed. In other words, how data is acquired, how data is used, and how data can be, disseminated. So this act is there that guides. But the problem is that the issue is that most citizens are not even aware of this Data Protection Act, and even the companies or even the government agencies are not even complying with this act. So I remember recently that the president issued an order for all state agencies and departments to make sure that they comply with this act. So that is a plus in that direction. And then of course network shutdown, which is an issue, but fortunately we haven't experienced that yet. Before the election, prior to the election, the police chief went on air and said that, hey, we are going to shut down the internet during the elections and all that. But the president was quick to come up and say that, hey, it's not going to happen. And my organization was able to convince the president for him to come down and say that, hey, you can't do that. So basically that's for now. I mean, I'm sure we'll discuss more as we go on. Thank you.
Do they know you're in the country?
Thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Omoyele Shore, and my colleague here works for the government. I work against the government.
That's why I was asking if they know he's in the country.
And I want to start by talking about difficult conversation using my Ghanaian experience recently. I went to Ghana to cover the Ghanaian presidential election and was amazed at how calm Ghanaians are because the National Electoral Commission apparently did not expect and had not prepared itself for who won the election and couldn't announce the results of the election. But we were there announcing the result of the election because the NEC in Ghana did not know that their people were releasing results on the internet until we reminded them. And in the middle of the night, I had to do what we did in Nigeria in 2015, release the results as we have them completely, and pronounce the winner of the election. It was very difficult for Ghanaians to handle. They've never seen it before. Why don't you wait for NEC the next morning? We said, well, we have moved away from that period where we wait for officials to determine election results when we have them. So I just want to use that as a way of, as a segue into difficult conversations around here. But I think most importantly, difficult conversations are difficult because of control, especially in Nigeria. And you'll be surprised that sometimes it is not government that tries to control difficult conversation. It's usually culture. And in some serious cases, I think religion is the most powerful instrument that controls difficult conversation. And you all know how it has been. And of course, national security, and I wish the National Security Advisor to the President was here today. As you guys know, one of the most difficult conversations we have had to handle in Nigeria in the last few days was that huge cash haul that was found in an apartment in Lagos, right? It was difficult not because we didn't know that they were stealing money and hiding it, but determining who owned the money, and eventually the person who claimed to own the money, when he showed up or the agency showed up, they wanted to make it difficult for us to discuss because they said this was money warehoused for national security. And then, of course, we were able to have that conversation on the internet because they had no control over the internet as an avenue for discussing such a public and important matter. And I remember one of that difficult conversation was revealing who the owner of the house was. People just didn't accept it. You know, why? And eventually revealing the owner of the individual apartments in the building, which was as a process of, you know, gathering information from citizens who knew who these people were, including guards within the apartment who had been carrying this huge amount of money on their heads to the apartment and had the misfortune of being given 500 naira when they have just carried about $1 million and kept in an apartment with the help of the wife of the NIA director. Measure of stubbornness in ensuring that the amplification of our voices to demolish the barriers and frontiers of difficult conversation is not silent, and we must keep using the internet because it's the best. Sadly, we have no control over the internet yet because, as our Ghanaian brothers were saying, when they want to talk about optic fiber, they are not talking about optic fiber that came from Lagos to Accra. It's the one from London. So if the London guys, the American guys decide that they don't want us to experience internet tomorrow, they just turn off a switch, and that's it. Well, that's my submission for now.
That's going to be a tough act to follow. Can we have another round of applause for Sahara reporters, please? Because they're doing very important work. For me, I'm concerned with the underlying infrastructure that enables you all here to be in the room or online or on Twitter. My background is in systems engineering and telecoms. My focus has been delivering infrastructure that enables you to do the multifarity of things that you have been doing over the air, online, social media. Having delivered one submarine cable system, some of you may be familiar with Main One, and then it became clear that you can't just deliver these pieces of infrastructure in isolation. You have to engage in public policy advocacy, because if you tell them what you're doing is giving people access to the internet, they'll say, oh, is that through a pipeline? And if you say yes, it's through a pipeline, then they're going to ask you for NNPC levy. And it's going to be a difficult conversation to explain that, no, this pipe is actually the length of the hair or the width of the hair, and it can be underwater. So those are some of the difficult conversations that we first had. And then, having realized that you need to do public advocacy, we got the opportunity to engage with the federal government of Nigeria and to draft the National Broadband Plan. So in drafting the broadband plan, for the first time you have a plan and you have a target for the country, and it also helps you discover some of the difficulties in actually causing data penetration to happen everywhere in the country. One conversation is, does everybody have a right to access the internet? That's a difficult conversation to have with some people. Some operators will tell you that it's not economically viable to provide coverage and connectivity to every part of the country. And some of you will argue that the internet is a basic fundamental right now in this new age, 21st century. But some people still argue that if you can afford to pay for the service, then you can afford to get the service. So that's a difficult conversation to have. And where we're having some of these conversations, we're having people thinking that data is the way forward, the future is data for everybody. The operators are telling you that the OTTs are riding over their infrastructure, but they're not paying anywhere near enough as they should for the services that they're enjoying. And while we're having that conversation, at the same time, somebody comes out with research statistics that shows you that even though we say we have high levels of internet penetration, there's still about 40 million people that don't have access to 2G. So all of you in this room represent a very different class of people, because there's some people that don't even have connectivity in other parts of the country. The Northeast is one area, for instance, where all infrastructure in that space has been decimated due to Boko Haram. And so sometimes we may sit in Lagos, or we may sit in Abuja, or we may sit in Port Harcourt and think that we represent Nigeria or Africa. And then you realize that you are actually maybe in the top percentile of the country in that regard. And that is also a difficult conversation to have for some people. And at the same time, when you're saying we need more access to infrastructure, governments are telling you that they need to generate revenue, they need to raise taxes, and you're saying waive the fees for permitting. You're saying don't charge any tax for 2 years so that we can build out our infrastructure. But then you're declaring that you're making millions of dollars in profit at the end of the year, which becomes another difficult conversation, which says, well, if you're making that much money, why don't we get a piece of that at the same time? Okay? And then, of course, all of this is being done for what reason? So that we can all communicate, so that I can read Sahara reporters from the comfort of my home, even though they're in New York, and they're speaking about Nigeria, and I can comment on it on Twitter. Now that comes to what we're talking about here in terms of internet freedom. And so I have the access to the internet, but does that mean that I have the freedom to say whatever I like just because I don't like you, or just because I don't like what you're doing? Or do I have the freedom to speak against what the government is doing without fear of reprisal? So there is some difficult conversations around the social contract of online behavior. And there is a code of conduct out in some countries don't have them. So those are some of the difficult conversations that I have in my day-to-day job about finding balance in providing access, infrastructure, and return on investment.
All right. So you were not here when we talked about how we're going to start the conversation, but I'm sure you will fall in line, because speaker after speaker, they're given like an introductory notes or speeches on difficult conversations around what they do.
Thanks for that, Victor, and apologies. I was in a difficult conversation, which was the panel on dangerous and hate speech online, looking particularly at Nigeria and southern Kaduna and the experiences of people there. And I have 3 topics. There are more, but I thought today that I'd raise briefly 3, and then we can explore which ones people are most interested in. The first one is sex, and I think Omoye touched on that a little bit. I think it's an issue that is difficult because it has many different dimensions in the online world. There is pornography. There is information about sexual and reproductive health. There's information and online engagement with sexuality, with sexual identity, sexual orientation, an issue of sex education. And I think it's a really difficult issue for us to talk about. Omoye mentioned the issue of religion and homophobia and recognition of people's sexual orientation. I think even just sex education in schools and websites that provide sex education is also controversial in our communities. And I think it challenges us because I think most of us, most humans, are not very good at dealing with these issues ourselves. How many of you have teenage children? Not many, you're all so young. Have you tried talking to those of you that do have older children, or children that have hit puberty? Have you tried talking to them about sex? You know, and I find that extremely difficult, not because it's difficult to talk about this, but because our children are growing up in a world where you are bombarded with sexual information or information about sex. These days, even films or television programs that are PG rated or 13 rated still would have quite a lot of sexual content in it. But when it comes to the internet, there's this paranoia and there's this fear that children should be protected from being exposed to information about sex. So I think this is a very tricky issue, and I think it's one that's difficult because the world has also changed. And we